Okay, I have several people ask this question. I'm going to make sure we go ahead and get this out. If people in this audience want to have their heart and cardiovascular system checked out after listening to Jim Boniford and Tony Britton, what would you recommend that they do? What are the options available to somebody who is motivated by this program that wants to get their heart checked out? And Barry, we'll start with you.
I think the most important thing is to start with your primary care doctor and make sure that you know your numbers. In other words, know what your blood pressure is, know what your cholesterol is, and not just your total cholesterol, but your good cholesterol, your HDL, which you want to be high. Know what your bad cholesterol is, the LDL, which you want to be low. I call that lousy cholesterol, L for lousy. And you should also know if you've got diabetes, what your hemoglobin A1C level is. You should know what your body mass index is, your BMI. That tells you if you are the appropriate weight for your height. And I think if you know all of your numbers when you leave your doctor's office, you're more apt to want to set some goals for yourself. And so I think knowing that information becomes extremely important. I just want to say also that we have techniques and screening tests that are available now that really help you to see below the surface. Instead of, I use an iceberg analogy. With the very tip is what we see. We're really trying to figure out below the surface what is going on with you so that we can, instead of treating your cardiac disease once it becomes manifest, we can begin to treat you before you ever have the problem. And Judge Bodiford is a perfect example of that. He's a veteran of our heart screening process. And so uncovering that before it becomes a problem, I think, is real important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would just echo a lot of things that Barry said and add a couple of things. The other thing is family history is extremely important. Most of us take it for granted that mom or dad or grandmother or sister or brother died of a heart attack or had a stroke, but those are all part of the cardiovascular spectrum. And it's extremely important to know and understand what your risk factors are, and that is one of them. It's not just the smoking, the lack of exercise, it's not just the numbers, but also understanding who you are before you get or begin to have these problems. The other thing I will say, it's a little bit of a danger point. Understand what the symptoms are, and especially in particular, those symptoms are a little bit different in women. And then for all of us, one of the things that is very common, and we will write it off as just something minor, which is heartburn and reflux. So be aware of those real subtle things. You know, I can't quite get up that flight of stairs and things like that. So think about a heart screening. We want to be better if it was reflux, but think about looking into your heart when you begin to have those very subtle things that you may not think are related to a heart problem.
Barry, question. How would someone know if they were having a heart attack? What would it feel like? And is there any difference between men and women in that respect?
Well, the idea that you are going to have what we call the Hollywood heart attack, you know, the chest pain, is probably unrealistic. Most people have different symptoms, and chest pain is very common. It's usually described as a heaviness or a tightness that often will move to the arm or the neck or the jaw area. It can be accompanied by nausea and sweating. And those, a constellation of symptoms like that should raise one's awareness that this might be something going on with the heart. And it's extremely important that once those symptoms are recognized, that we bring the symptoms to the attention of a physician or the medical community, because in what we do, time is muscle, and that means once you're having a heart attack, if you wait, you're going to have heart muscle that dies. The other part of the question is men and women. Women have often very different and more subtle symptoms. The symptoms of a heart attack in women may not be chest pain at all. It may be symptoms like reflux. It may be simply nausea or not feeling well. And so we tell the women that we see that you've got to be aware that you may not have the same types of symptoms that we all talk about with the Hollywood heart attack, and you have to be aware of that. If something's different and is of concern, we recommend that you have it evaluated.
Frequently, the first sign of anything wrong with your heart is a heart attack. So the person who shows up and says, well, why am I going to do this? Why do you want to put a stent in me? Or why do you want to do this bypass surgery? And I'm fine. I feel great.
Okay, this is a good question. I know that's on the minds of everyone. It's often been said that watchmakers' kids have watches that don't keep time. A cobbler's kids walk around with holes in their shoes. What do you two do for your heart health? What advice would you give to the folks in this audience to keep a healthy heart so that they don't have to deal with a heart attack? Barry, why don't we start with you?
Well, one thing that I always say when folks ask me why I became a cardiologist is that every male in my family has had a heart attack before the age of 50, right up to and including my father. And so paying particular attention to the risk factors for heart disease is extremely, extremely important. And so personally, I make certain that I exercise regularly. Folks around me will often say that I stop eating at a certain point, cut the meal down so we don't overeat, and I always look at the types of foods that I'm eating and decide, is it worth eating this type of food? Is it going to be worth it for me? And follow my numbers. And so exercise, avoiding smoking, following numbers, and really trying to model the way for my patients is real important.
Yeah, I think that's important. And personally, not just and this just happened to me within the last 6 years. I went into heart surgery because it just really was very, very satisfying in my training. But within the last 5 years, I've had a 37-year-old sister who had a heart attack, died 4 years later after surgery here in Atlanta of something related to the heart. I had a 45-year-old brother drop dead of a heart attack. And so that's why I really emphasize it's very important to know your family history. Now, both of them had risk factors, but that's still very, very young to have this problem. So it begins with me with really thinking about how I eat, thinking about exercise is not I think most of us look at it as just that. It's an exercise. And we have to sort of figure out a way that we can incorporate that in our daily lives. So think about that, but there's a lot of great ways out there that you can get that 30 to 45 minutes a day. And what you want to focus on is the heart rate. What should my heart rate be? 220, write it down, minus your age, is about where you need to target, and you need to try to get that for about 30 minutes at a time, okay? So when patients come to me and they say, well, I'm walking around work, doesn't count. You know, get outside at lunch and walk around the building and really monitor that heart rate. You can feel it right here at your wrist. Don't poke on your neck. That's not a good thing to do. And you can even sometimes feel it right here at your temple. Other places that you can do that very safely. Watch, eat to live, don't live to eat. I just came back from a family event this weekend, and I mean, I tell you, they're just piling on the food, and everybody's 50 pounds overweight. It's not necessary.
From a business perspective, where do you think healthcare is going? Will there be future breakthroughs in your business that will change the health and long-term lifespan of people with potential heart problems?
I think the business of healthcare is really driving physicians to think more in terms of what it means and what health has, the impact that health has on our economy and a lot of other things. And I think we're out there on the cutting edge of this, which is, you heard Jim talk about integration and coordination. Well, what happens when you don't have that is you have a lot of duplication in healthcare services. Patient goes to Barry, has an echo, and he comes to me and I need to see that echo. I repeat the echo, I have to fax papers and all of these different things. The very little subtle things, if you duplicate that thousands and thousands of times a day across multiple healthcare systems around the country, it just adds on to that. But it doesn't improve anything. because we still don't have the same information. We're not working from the same playbook. Well, what we've done is create a system where we can all be on the same playbook all the time. In fact, when I leave here, I'm going for the second time now to a clinic where in that clinic we're going to have cardiologist, the cardiac surgeon, the echocardiographer. We'll be able to call on our anesthesiologist, call on our specialty kind of people that support us to make a decision about one patient at that particular point in time to reduce some of these unnecessary visits back and forth to the hospital. And we're all on the same page. I don't have to interpret anything. I can talk to my colleague because he's sitting right there beside me, and we're making a decision collectively for the patient. So those are some of the subtle things that we're going to have to adjust to as we move forward in this healthcare transformation era that we're in.
I think that it's subtle, but it's not so subtle in a way. And it's not subtle because what we're doing is we're starting to put really the patient's problem at the very center of a system that was very fragmented. And by putting a clinic in place where all the doctors now have to be in the same area to see the patient, to give a diagnosis, it's very different. I think a patient like that would have to wait for weeks, maybe even months, to have everyone give them the information they need to be able to make an educated decision about something very complicated. And this particular procedure that we're talking about is a cutting-edge procedure. It's a procedure that involves putting in a new heart valve without actually having to open the chest to do it. And we need a coordinated approach. It's a team effort between surgery and cardiology and vascular surgery and others as well that will allow us to do that safely and do that at Wellstar in the very, very near future.
Changing gears a little bit, what is the most difficult part of your job to be in medicine? And William, I know your wife Sandy's here to kind of keep you honest on this. You give up a lot with family time, the stress is very high. But beyond that, what are the things that make your job most difficult?
Personally, I think that the time issue is a real difficult one. We work during the day. We work at night. Most people have their heart attacks in the very early morning hours, and that's just unfortunate. You'd think if we could coordinate a little bit better, it would be from 9 to 5, but it's not that way. So that's difficult. And I think the changes in healthcare, managing in a world where things are changing so dramatically, is also challenging. We started in a different generation, and the work-lifestyle balance was not really as important as it is to the younger generation, and so we have to work and manage through that and understand that's something that's changing for us.
Yeah, I agree. I think yes, my wife will keep me honest, but the biggest trade-off is that one that you have to make at home for kids that are. I'll never forget the first time that I didn't know my son was talking. And he said something, and I said to my wife, "Did he just say that?" She said, "Yeah, he's been saying that for 2 weeks." I mean, where were you? I was like, I had no idea. And but they understand, and we make adjustments in our priorities because treating heart disease and doing what I do every day is a passion, and it's more than just a job. And I think probably one of the more frustrating pieces of the job is it has nothing to do with the job itself. It's the externalities that are imposed upon us by what sometimes doesn't appear to be very logical, rational thought processes. And so I think it's incumbent upon physicians like myself and Barry, who are already doing this, to get involved on a different level. As I told my partner last week, you got to come out of the operating room and you got to sit around the table with the decision makers so you can have a voice. And I think you know, guys like Tom Price and Phil Gingrey, who are in Congress, can sort of be that 1 degree of freedom away for us. But we need to be a part of that discussion so that we can be a part of a rational healthcare system that's going to make a real serious difference in the future.
Question, there's used to be a lot of discussion about heart transplants and artificial hearts. Don't hear so much about that these days, or maybe it's just what I'm reading these days. Would both of you address that? Is that something that's still going on? And I think in conversations I've had with you, Dr. Cooper, you have done heart transplants, right?
Yes, that was part of my time at Emory, and yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff happening on that front. In particular with replacement heart therapy that's not a transplant, using long-term, small, temporary, implantable devices that basically take over the function of the heart. Dick Cheney has one of those right now, that you can go out and walk around and be like a normal human being. So that's called what we call destination therapy. And that's really expanding, because heart failure, as people live longer and we exhaust our options for taking care of a valve or putting in stents, the heart begins to fail. There's nothing correctable, and so that may be an option for patients. Transplants, of course, is a limited business, obviously, because it requires taking an organ from another person. And so that's something at some point down the road we're going to look at getting into at Wellstar, especially as it relates to the destination therapy. But a lot of things happening, and really in that arena is expanding quite rapidly, as a matter of fact.
We are already, I think, starting to bridge patients to destination therapy, as it were.
Right.
We have the ability for patients who are very sick and whose hearts may not allow them to get to the point where they can have a transplant, where they can have a more permanent implanted assist device. We have the ability at Kennestone now to put in devices that will help the failing heart,
right,
and will allow those patients who might not otherwise have survived to be bridged to a more permanent treatment. So we're already doing some of those things now, and as William said, we plan to do more of them in the future.
I have found this very useful myself. Y'all please give our speakers a round of applause. Will y'all be available to answer a few questions when somebody comes up and said, I got this feeling, I got that feeling, what do I need to do? Okay.
Sure.
On behalf
Cath lab is open too.
Right.
The cath lab is open. Yes.
You just need their American Express card number, right? I'm going to close out our meeting on behalf of our chairman, Tony Britton. I want to thank Judge Boterford for doing a fine job this morning. I want to thank Wellstar for their sponsorship of this event and all that Wellstar does in this community. I want to thank each of you for being here and being attentive. Our next First Monday breakfast will be with the Deputy Commissioner of Economic Development, Gretchen Corbin. I think you'll find that really interesting to each one of you as to how economic development works in this state and where that business is going in the future. So with that, we stand adjourned, and thank you all for hanging around a little bit longer. Bye-bye.